Today's guest is Kristy Haung. She is the Business Development Manager at ABS Group, former president of AFCEA Bethesda Emerging Leaders. She was an AFCEA 40 Under 40 recipient. She's a graduate of the ACT-IAC Associates Leadership Development Program and currently in the ACT-IAC Voyagers Program for 2024. Very exciting things going on for Kristy. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So for those who have not interacted with you at an event here in the DC area, talk a bit about yourself. Where are you from, who you are, and what you do?
Sure. So yeah, don't let that intro sway you or trick you into thinking I'm impressive. Those are all the I think it was in the last year that all that happened. It's been a big year for me. So background. So I've been in the industry for longer than I'd like to admit at this point. It's been about 15 years, I think. Certainly didn't start out saying I want to do government IT or anything like that. I went to Radford. Shout out to anybody else who went to Radford. Loved it. Had a great time. I'll leave it at that. And I originally went there to be an an English teacher. Did end up majoring in English, but as it turns out, was not the calling I expected it to be. So just graduated with an English major and figured out what am I going to do. I worked retail for a while. Was kind of in the sales role there, just trying to figure out like what exactly is my path. I thought I had a little momentary should I go to law school kind of blip there, which was an interesting path, and then just wasn't ready to take myself that seriously yet. So if I'm being honest, I was just like, if I do this, I don't want to go for 2 years, change my mind, have all that student debt. So I decided I moved back to the DC area. This seemed to be where all the jobs were. I was lucky enough that I had a lot of friends and family and a lot of Radford grads, a lot of I went to high school in Loudoun County, so a lot of people I knew in the area. And so I won't say I lucked into it, but I got lucky with my first, I'll call it a real job, right? At CGI, where I was really wearing a lot of different hats while I was there. Did a lot of proposal writing, a lot of projects here and there. Do this PowerPoint, help us with this presentation, help us format this resume. There's too many of those requests. Kind of started out in that world, and I really enjoyed it because one, I made some lifelong friends there, some people who hang out with to this day, but it really helped me to see different sides of the business, both the sales side, the proposal side of it, the project delivery side of it, because I was working on some, projects here and there as well. So certainly got a diverse background, and I got to work on different opportunities, whether it was, a cyber opportunity, a business process opportunity, an IT, a digital transformation. It was a little bit of everything. So I did get insight into a lot of things. But really kind of that started me down the path of they put me in associates, which was a fantastic experience, which I highly recommend to anybody who's considering it. And that helped me to kind of sit back, see what was out there, understand a little more. People will that I worked with at CGI will tell you I was like the silent person in the back of the room, which will shock anybody who knows me now of how much I talk too much at this point, right? I think you probably wanted like a 30-second background. Here I am 20 minutes into
Oh,
it.
this is perfect.
But certainly got to observe and understand kind of the ins and out of the industry. And then I moved into a pure business development role, which was an interesting jump for me. I think I had touched on the proposal management, capture management at CGI, and then I said I got to try I'll call it the dark side. It was an interesting experience. Again, made some lifelong friends, a digital transformation company. Shout out to Cody and Jeff and Aubrey. But certainly learned a lot. But I also learned that, hey, I'm not a pure business development person. I think you can go to a lot of these events, but I love to network. I love it. I think I'll say that it was a great reach in my career. It was a big step for me and very different from the work that I was doing previously. So, going to conferences, talking with different customers, really being that customer first, that going in, shaking hands and talking about, our services, what we did, and really learning more about each agency helps me to do some deep dives into the agency missions to learn more about that, but it also helped me to learn a lot about myself in terms of my skill set. I think really I belong in the strategy side of things more than I do the it turns out I'm not the extrovert that I thought I was. I really am. I'd come home from these conferences and I'd have to sit in silence for 6 straight days to recover. So moved back from there, went from a large to a small business, small data analytics firm, where I did capture and BD, kind of both sides of the fence. But it's for a small business, so really took me back to my proposal days, back to my learning a little bit of everything, having to have that flexibility of doing it all, which was also, again, I'll say a huge learning experience. But ultimately ended up here where I'm at ABS Consulting, a risk management company. So I think it's a crooked line for how I got here, but I'm leading growth across our federal market. So I went from specializing in one agency to now kind of supporting across across our portfolio, but really love the balance of being able to do some of that BD, right? Being a customer facing person, but also doing the strategy of the capture management. So I really like you know, being on both sides of the fence, really. But I also enjoy kind of helping to set that strategy for the growth, helping to really figure out where do I think the government's going, where can I contribute, how can I help our company grow, and really kind of pushes me to learn more about what's happening in the industry. So I'm really happy with where I'm at today, but certainly wasn't I won't call it a easy path, but it certainly wasn't a straight line from I'm going to go into consulting and now look at me, I'm a consultant. But I think it's a pretty common path that a lot of us have taken, kind of figuring out what works, what doesn't. And I was lucky to find a lot of people along the way to kind of help me find my next step in the journey.
Well, to that point, so the positions you found, were they did you network to learn about them? Did you just cold apply? How did that come about?
So, I mean, it's interesting, but I mean, a lot of it was through ACT-IAC, or AFCEA. I remember when I moved from CGI to NIC, it certainly was through ACT-IAC. I had started going to these networking events. I kind of made it one of those personal goals, like you're going to go to these things, you're going to shake hands, and you're going to actually talk. You're not going to sit there and smile, and you're not going to just go there for the booze. That's a good lesson learned too, coming up in the industry. So certainly, found a lot of those, had some good conversations with people where it just clicked. Jeff Nolf, hey Jeff, we had just a great conversation of, there was something about it. He's a fellow Radford grad too. So, I think sometimes there's just a chemistry there that leads you down a path. And I was looking for the next challenge too at every stage of, I felt like I had learned a lot, and I was coming to a decision point of this is your career path, or if you go in this direction, you can learn something new. And so each time I felt like it was the right time. Either I had just had a baby, or something big had happened where I just won a deal, or something where I learned something about a new technology that was coming out. I was like, I want to go after this type of work. But largely it was through networking, through meeting people, through the AFCEA and ACT-IAC community, where it really is an opportunity to talk to people up and coming in their career, people really established in their career. So you know was a like I said, every step has been a big leap for me and a big change from what it was previously. But a lot of it has been driven by, either a mentor recommended me, introduced me to somebody, or just from a, you know, right time, right circumstances kind of conversation that led me to, say, okay, fine, let's have the conversation. I'm happy, but let's have that conversation, right? And they kind of pushed me over the top there.
Mm-hmm. Now, are you leveraging your English degree in your current role? I guess it's probably the easiest, right, to fit in other than a flat out business degree.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that like the people who've seen my proposal writing might say no at this stage, because it's just like, Chrissy, this is 5 sentences that you jammed into one. I'm not gonna, that's not okay anymore. But yeah, I certainly think there's a lot to the critical thinking that you learn from doing a lot of this reading to understanding the context behind things. I mean, I certainly think that a lot of the way that I learn about what's happening in the world has been through reading, specifically within the government, right? I think diving deep, doing, into research about whether it's agencies or their missions, I think a lot of those skill sets from my English, I'll call it English training, I don't know, has really helped me to be a little bit more efficient in that, and to really actually have that desire to keep reading and to learning more. I think it's really and to want diversity of information too, right? If I'm not just going to say, okay, I read that one thing and that is what it is. It's like, okay, but there's 6 different perspectives on this. So it certainly contributed. I wouldn't say it's the easiest path. So anybody out there, thinking about yeah, I think you can go with something a little bit more generic, like a business major or something like that, that I think may have immediate hiring stature, I guess. What I would say, I think it took a little bit longer to say like, hey, I know it's an English major, but you need me in this sales role.
Mm.
But I certainly think that it wasn't fully a waste of time. And I still love to read. So, I guess in the end, like that's to some extent uh, something that helps me as like a stress reliever in the background too. So as we're going into hardcore proposal season, certainly helps to have things to kind of distract you and take your mind off that as well. So I think that actually does contribute to my career in itself.
So as you've gone through this journey, what's something you've run into that you wish was different than what it was for you? Like if you were to look back and say, man, that was really tough. I wish we did that differently as an industry or as companies or just in general. What's something you might pick out that could be better for those coming behind you?
Sure. So I think from like a career progression perspective, I think because I kind of tried out a lot of different things, it was helpful for me in the end, but I think I really just didn't know what the potential paths were, right? I think a lot of what I did was kind of tactical, if you will. So I was talking to the people that I was working with on a daily basis, but not necessarily talking with, the executive level, right? Just hire people who've gone through it, who've probably had something similar to me of, you try on multiple hats to figure out. And I think that's inevitable. But I certainly think having exposure to what these career paths, what the potential would be earlier in my career, I think is something that's really important. And just formal mentorship programs, I think would
Mm.
go a long way in bridging that gap. I think I was just a little bit too nervous when I was, younger in my career or earlier in my career to really stick my neck out and say like, hey, can you tell me about how you got here? Can you walk me through this path? And I think a lot of that was I think they've come a long way to making sure that new hires and people like that, have access to people, have access to mentorship programs and things like that. But I certainly think that um as somebody who I'd call, I guess I'm more tenured at this point, trying to take a more active role to mentor the next generation, and just having like informal and formal opportunities for people to understand. It's like keeping that open, that transparency of you can ask me anything, it's okay. I think that's an important thing that we need to really try to make a more concerted effort to improve upon, because it would have been great to have had a mentor earlier in my career process that really kind of gave me that, like, here's a 1,000-foot view. There are many paths, and like maybe make some recommendations of, if you're thinking about this, why don't you try this, right? If you're thinking about this, here's a good way, and kind of just walking me through those steps. I think now I'm much more curious, but at the time, I think I was just so terrified to be curious. So
Right.
it's like, I just want to do good at what I'm asked, what I'm tasked with today, that I wasn't really looking more longer term. So I think that kind of slowed me down. And I think that's something that certainly, I think a lot of younger people, everybody's driven by something. And if it's money, like, that's fine. If it's like, learning, that's also great. I think everybody has their things, but I think there's certainly a lot of room for improvement in terms of saying, okay, whatever your one or two or three things that you want to have, like, here are some options that you should look at, just to talk more like long-term options, instead of really just focusing on that daily task of, here's what you can do, here's what we need you to, so I certainly think that's something that I'm actively trying now to support the next generation. And then I think is important, just looking back as a, man, I really wish I had tried harder to find that mentor and to find that path on my own. But I think it goes both ways of, some people are going to be like that, of they're just too nervous to kind of to step
Mhm.
out of that. So really kind of looking at that and saying, I wish there were, putting in those formal things, and then also just putting it out there in the world, that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to, just ask somebody to be your mentor, or find ways to get connected to other people who are interested in mentorship.
I find that interesting because you're right. We don't tend to do formal mentoring until, mid-career, as we see somebody who's ready to move into maybe a leadership role. That we don't really tag early career, first year, second year, third year mentoring. And I agree with you. I can see some value in that, just in helping them to ask the questions that they feel are stupid and so they don't want to ask out loud.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
What does capture mean? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of terms we use in our world that aren't taught in school.
Yep. Our acronym nonsense. It's
Yeah.
just, I forget whenever I talk to people, either on the commercial side of my company or just outside of our world. And they're like, Kristy, I have no idea what you said for the last, 20 minutes, but it sounds like you do. And that's great. And it's just like, okay, you're right. You're right.
So that's a really great suggestion, because I think I know with the associates program, I've been helping with them for the last few years, and we really talk about how they need to get mentors. It would be it'd be something nice if companies considered that for early career people, pair them up with somebody.
Yeah. And I think part of it is, you don't, it's hard when somebody's there and you're like, I really want them to stay. I want this to be their career. But if it's their first job out of college, you're like, is this really going to be your career? Or this is most likely going to be a stepping stone, right? And that's okay. But that doesn't mean we should not try to develop them early, right? I think that's the important thing here is yeah, you're trying to figure out what they're the best at, but so are they. And I
Mhm.
think sometimes it takes, like, sometimes it's just one person to say, hey, I think you'd be great at this. Why don't we try this out, to help them find their path? I'll say that I bring this up way too frequently, but I saw this documentary called For Grace, and it's about this Curtis Duffy, a chef in Chicago, who, like, really just didn't have a path forward. And his home ec teacher, it was like sixth or seventh grade or something, was like, you're really good for this. You have a knack for this. And now he's like a 3-star Michelin chef, right?
Wow.
It's like, who's that one person in your life who said something? For me, that's Brian Lenane. Hey, Brian, if you watching this, who just told me, hey, I think you could be really good at this capture thing. You have a natural talent for the strategy behind this. And it was kind of like, I always felt like I was questioning things too much and challenging too much, like kind of like in a curmudgeon-y kind of way. And I'm generally somewhat negative person, right? So I kind of was always like, well, I don't want to seem negative. I don't want to say that. And it's kind of like, no, you need that healthy pushback to move forward. And I think it's interesting to see, like, who that one person who kind of made that big push, right?
Mhm.
The big moment in your career. And I think a lot of times it could be something as simple as, hey, have you thought about this, right? And I think that's something that we can all do for people straight out of college, or people who are early in their career, people who are new in a new career path, right? I think there's also something to say for people who are like, I'm going to go back to school. I'm not happy in this role. I want to try something new out. Like, yeah, a lot of it is just lack of exposure to the possibilities. So I think starting earlier and explaining that, or at least letting people try out different paths, I think is really important. And hey, sometimes it's having a mentor be like, hey, giving them the honest truth of, I get it. I get why you want to do this. I get, if you're chasing the money, this is where the money's at. But I think you'd be really good at this. Or,
Mm,
sometimes it's okay to also say, like, there's a big gap. Like, you need to take a step back. And if you're going to go down that path, I think you need to, whether it's take some classes or learn a little bit more about, whatever, whether it's like a technology or about, this agency before you just try to jump in there. I think it's important to also get that like healthy feedback too.
that's really good. Yes. So what's coming up next for you here in this new year?
Oh man. Um, this is a difficult question because I'll say I have two kids under the age of 5. So I'll, it's a snow day today, which is why I did this background to kind of pretend like it wasn't, or it's just kind of pure insanity right now. So I'm kind of living day to day, but I moved into a new role recently. I was previously just doing, capture and leading kind of growth across specific accounts, and now I'm across the whole federal team. So, I'm trying to embrace that. I think people will tell you I rely a lot on my like humor and my sarcasm. So it's trying to embrace like what kind of leader I can be. I can't fully change that. I can't, I think a lot of times people have these like grand leadership quotes, or these big, moments of really bringing everybody together. So I'm really spending this next year trying to learn what kind of leader I can be. I think Voyagers is going a long way, and that, my former boss, Frank, has gone a long way to show me, pave that path for me of here's what kind of leader you can be, or here's the possibilities. And I think that right now, my next year, I think I'm just going to focus on learning a lot, trying to listen to the, our team, and really just trying to survive with the kids. But really trying to figure out, yeah, what kind of leader can I be? What potential is there in the future, in the next, coming years? But I'm feeling really positive and happy with where I'm at in my career. So it's really about developing beyond where I'm at right now. So not a very exciting, what's next, really just trying to learn and grow as an individual, as a leader. But I think it's a kind of an important part in my life, and professionally, and my personal life as well, to kind of figure out that balance of, now that I moved into this leadership role, how do I still, stay present as a parent, as a working parent? And I think that's it's the big question. If you know how to do that, please tell me. Would love to know. Anybody can open to feedback, because I certainly have not figured it out yet.
Well, Kristy, I'm looking forward to things as you go through the Voyager program. There's a lot of great, as you said, learning opportunities there as you craft what your leadership methodology is going to be, and look forward to seeing that for you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much. Looking forward to the next networking event with you as well. So appreciate you having me.